So we're looking at the Pathron Draft, which is I believe a higher end board in Pathron's line, and it's like got carbon fiber from tip to tail, and it's got a really nice simple look to it, and it's kind of a step up from it's like a more aggressive version of the Legend, and it's got a little bit more of kind of like a harder charging kind of ride. The one thing that really kind of threw me for a loop with this board was the stance width. It's really fucking wide. It's like I'm a 23-inch wide stance, and I barely fit on this board. And I emailed Pathron about it, and I thought maybe this was just like a sample board they sent me with like, the inserts just were off. But no, actually, this is how they set this board up, because apparently in Poland and in Europe, they're really going for really wide stances. And so if you're an average rider like myself, like I'm 5'10", and a 23 is pretty wide for my legs, and most of the good riders are like anywhere from 21 to 24. So if you're like an average rider like me, this board just won't work for you. I had one option right here. That's all I could. It's the only place I could mount my bindings. So I had to be set back, and that was it, man. So that kind of sucked, and I think they need to kind of change that, because even if they're most riders are going to ride wide, there are some people that still like a more middle ground stance, like most riders around. But so if you go with a really wide stance, then this might be a good board for you. I found it pretty aggressive, kind of like on a borderline between like all mountain and aggressive all mountain. It could charge pretty hard. It was pretty stiff, stable at speeds. I could bomb on this no problem. And I think this is a 161 or 160, and it has a setback, and then it has this little micro camber of like 0.25 of a millimeter. So that's not very much. It's more kind of like a flat to rocker board as opposed to a hybrid camber board. And then it has a nice mellow, like subtle rocker a little bit after the bindings, and I found it held really well on a carve. It didn't have that spring out of the turn like a lot of boards do, which makes it really fun to carve, but it held. You could lean in as hard as you wanted, and it was very hard to get the board to wash out. Turn initiation was kind of moderate, maybe borderline challenging. It took a little bit of work to get this thing edge to edge. Maybe it was because I'm on the 161 and I have size 9 boots, but I was kind of surprised. I thought I would like this one the most because it's the most expensive, and I think it's still really cheap for like US. I think it's like $3.99, which is insanely good deal for a board like this quality. But I really had a lot more fun on the Legend. I felt like the Legend had a little bit more of a playful feel, but could still bomb and still carve, and just felt like it was more of an all-rounder. And the one biggest thing for me, the biggest turnoff about this board was I really couldn't play around with the stance. With my stance width, I couldn't center it up and ride this thing switch really well. It still rode really well, but I had to ride one way, and I was hoping to kind of play around with the stance and see how it rode, like perfectly centered, and then set it back and see how it carved and that kind of thing. But I couldn't do that, so this kind of limits the audience of who's going to ride. But I guess in Poland, wide stances are really the thing now, and that's what all the instructors and what have you are pushing. So I'd say maybe a great board for Europe, but for those who like a wide stance. But for most of us, it just wasn't a board I could recommend. I'd say you probably have a better time going a little cheaper and getting the Legend. So, hope this helps.